Good morning, good day, and good evening. I'm as always your host, Brody Robertson, and today we have a generic GitHub profile picture. But they have something important to say that is more important than the profile picture. Welcome to the show, Vixia, who actually sent me an email saying they want to do the show. And as you could probably tell from the title, it's going to be about VR on Linux and just the sort of state of things, how all this works, and just, yeah, give you an idea about what's actually going on. So, welcome to the show.
Welcome. I'm glad to be talking to you.
Oh, you're going to say something. This is going to be one of these episodes where we're not sure when the other person's going to stop speaking.
Yeah, it's gonna be one of those.
Okay, so, um, before that happens again, how about you just give a brief introduction of who you are, what you've been involved with, and yeah, just give an idea of what you're doing.
Yeah, so I've worked on ALVR for I think it's been about 3 or 2 years now.
Mhm.
I originally came to the project by me owning a Quest uh, 2 coming from Windows. I did try Linux previously, but I chose badly for my distro choice. I
Mhm.
chose a infamous distro called Manjaro. Yeah, as you can imagine, I've ran into some issues and I went back to Windows.
Mhm.
I did want to try Linux again after I think finding your channel.
Mhm.
And just getting really into it. Watched a little bit of your links from scratch
Oh God.
as you did a recent podcast on that.
Yeah.
That was certainly interesting.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I don't think I'm at that level yet.
Look,
So
it's not a good use of your time. You don't need to be at that level.
yeah, that's simply true. So I decided to settle on Arch,
Mhm.
Arch by the way,
Mhm.
specifically in EndeavorOS,
Okay.
just because it's easier to
Sure.
install.
Sure.
You don't have to got your columnize installer, nice UI. You know,
Mhm.
I did do a little bit of vanilla launch,
Mhm.
but I just ran into some issues
Yeah. Fair
recent,
enough.
with Arch install.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I was like, yeah. And so I chose EndeavorOS and, of course, found LVR. I was currently on NVIDIA at the time.
Mhm.
Uh, there was some definite issues. For example, during that time, the kernel parameter for mode setting wasn't very, you know, not many distros defaulted when you had a NVIDIA card, so you would have to
Mhm.
add it yourself
Right. Right.
at that time. So I was trying Wayland because I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. And I ran into some issues with that. Eventually I figured that out and got Wayland working.
Mhm.
And yeah, that was that. I realized I went on a rabbit hole, skipped past the part of ALVR. Um, So basically, at the time, LVR had no NVIDIA support. We did have a fallback software renderer using FFmpeg.
Mhm. Mhm.
FFmpeg is both amazing and a little bit of pain when you're dealing with a project like LVR.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so there's a dude that came in. I wish I remember his name. I know it starts with a T.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, dude. If you are listening to this, he added Linux, NVIDIA Linux support for the encoder, and man, for VR, standalone VR, you need a hardware encoder. It
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
makes a world of a difference. Software encoding is just too heavy,
Mhm.
and especially when you're doing stuff with VR applications, which tend to be CPU heavy, especially VR chat, which I'll get into
Mhm.
later, you can run into some issues with software encoding.
Mhm. So, oh, go
Um,
on.
no. I've been rambling on. I would like you to talk
Okay,
about,
I was just gonna ask
give me a
you to,
question.
for anyone unaware, to clarify what ALVR is and what the goal of the project is, because I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of people who have just never heard of
Yes,
it.
people haven't heard of ALVR. Yes, so ALVR is a standalone headset PC to PC to standalone headset streamer application.
Mhm.
So basically, we use OpenVR currently to the OpenVR API to capture images and poses from the SteamVR runtime and send that over to the standalone headset so you can view it on that standalone headset.
Mhm.
Um, there's some issues with that. I'll get into that later.
Mhm.
But that's the basic idea of the application of ALVR.
Mhm. The most obvious question with doing that is, like, wouldn't latency be an issue?
Latency can be an issue. It
Mhm.
depends on how bad of a setup you have in
Mhm.
terms of Wi-Fi and your PC hardware.
Mhm.
For example, currently, because of the way we have to interface with SteamVR, if you exceed a certain you exceed if your frame time exceeds more than half of your the limit to reach half of the FPS
Mhm.
of the streaming application or headset's refresh rate, SteamVR starts missing
Oh,
frames
yeah, that doesn't sound good.
because of a missing feature that was originally like getting discussed in I think it was 2016 or 15 and just died. The discussion died.
Mhm.
Um, and that discussion was on how to give the compositor um, preference over the application, which can also be helpful for your desktop compositor. Like
Mhm.
if your regular desktop application is like really heavy and like it's
Right, I would imagine that
lagging
would
out the
make a lot of
compositor.
sense for just a regular video game.
Hmm. And that missing piece is called compute tunneling, at least on AMD. I'm not sure what the NVIDIA term
Was
is.
that, did you say compute
And
tone? What was?
compute tunneling.
Oh, tunneling,
So,
tunneling. Okay.
yeah, tunneling. So basically, you have to be running in the compute queue. So you
Mhm.
can't be running on the graphics queue for this.
Mhm.
And you have to have proper have high privileged queue.
Mhm.
Two, there's Vulkan documentation you can find on the specifics of that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if you don't have it, well, let's just say your compositor doesn't have preference over the application, and so if the application exceeds the vsync uh, limit or the vsync time that it has allotted to it, like let's say you need a frame every like let's say 16 milliseconds. If your application takes 18 milliseconds to complete,
Mhm.
you're gonna get frame misses. So you may have stuttering. Um, in terms of your applications, you may notice that it's like the image is jittery.
Mhm.
And yeah,
That doesn't sound pleasant because I've
it
I've
is
been
not.
someone who I've never really been able to get into VR because I've always been pretty bad with like VR sickness. Like I
Motion sickness, yeah.
yeah yeah yeah. And that could have just been the early headsets and the early ways that applications were being designed. I know that there has been a lot of research into this problem and um, methods to deal with it. Because as I was saying before we started recording, my last experience with VR was the Vive 2, and before that it was the Oculus dev kits, like the early, like pre-release dev kits, which were obviously nowhere near as what we as good as what we have today. So anything where there's any sort of mismatch, frame skipping, anything like that, I imagine that would just make it so much worse.
Yeah, you for because of the way we experience VR,
Mm,
skipping frames or um, having the view lag behind you is very sickening. So we
mm,
have technologies like tracking prediction. So basically, it uses velocity
mm,
to predict where your head is going to be in the future,
mm.
and it helps reduce motion sickness.
Okay.
And we have reprojection. I'm sure you've seen it was in that headline maybe like a few months ago, but there's this demo, a Unity demo of
Mhm.
implementing reprojection in flat screen games and how that would how you can um, uncap input from the game's um, refresh rate and how that improves responsiveness and
I actually
reactivity,
missed
which
that
is
one, but
very
that does sound
important
really cool.
in VR.
Mhm,
Because if you lag your frame behind, because we use our eyes
mhm,
as a frame of reference for where you are in the world, if your view lags behind and your ears and your eyes aren't in sync,
mhm,
making obviously cause motion sickness,
mhm,
as
mhm.
you probably have experienced
Yeah,
before.
yeah. I've never let it get really bad where actually like throw up or anything. Usually when I start feeling a little bit off, I'm just done for the day, which made my in university I had a VR game development class, which made that class very fun. Um 10 minutes of work and then put the headset down, 10 minutes of work, put the headset down. It was not pleasant. I had to do a lot of testing just on a flat screen to get anywhere with that class.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly painful.
Well, especially the headset I was lent at the time wasn't even a nice headset. It was one of the like cheap Microsoft Media headsets. I don't know what it was called, but it was just not suitable for any gaming applications. It was you are on a couch watching a movie and anything else it just doesn't work for.
Yeah. Speaking of other things that are distracting
Mhm,
and possibly motion sickness inducing,
mhm,
in VR, persistence. So, as you know, display technology is hold frame. So, you hold a frame and then you hold another frame and then you hold another frame,
mhm,
and how long that frame is displayed on the monitor is lit on the monitor, that is persistence, and you
mhm,
want really low persistence for VR to reduce motion sickness.
mhm,
So that's another thing that I'm not sure at the time when you were doing the VR courses that was figured out at the time that you need really low persistence displays. So that could also contribute to motion sickness that you felt.
mhm. Well, how is the persistence problem resolved? Because the most logical thing that comes to mind is increasing the frame rate, but I'm imagining there's probably some other way that's also dealt with.
Yeah, so you do black frame insertion.
Okay.
Um, it's another technology. You just keep the backlit on less. That's another thing that you can do. So you just so when you're displaying a frame, like the pixels are the liquid crystal display, it's basically always like in a certain state, but
Mhm,
the backlight can be turned on and off. And what you want to do is you want to keep the backlight turned off as long as possible. And and the reason why you can't
mhm,
just like flash it like on and off like as shortly as possible is because lenses, which are an important part of VR because it helps increase your FOV and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and distorts the actual display. Um, it the lenses causes light to be lost, and
Mm-hmm.
so you have to have this trade-off between how long you keep your display on and how much light you want hitting your user's eyes. Most VR displays, from what I understand, are only produce like maybe 100 nits, and that's like lower than most SDR displays, which usually reach 200 nits of
Mm-hmm.
brightness.
I would imagine that with it being a much lower brightness, that also helps to counteract issues with people who are very photosensitive. Because if you're inserting black frames, I could imagine that could, like, with a certain displays, could induce a seizure in certain people.
Um, well, you're doing it so fast.
Mm.
You're turning off the display light so fast that you can't really notice it
Right, right.
because your eyes just can't update as fast
Mm.
as the light it's producing. You kind of have this persistence to your eyes to
Mm.
like if you're ever in a dark room and you wave your hand around, you see that motion blur that it gets, or you don't even need to be really in a dark room, but it
Mm.
definitely makes the effect more noticeable. It's because your eyes take time to absorb light and it takes time to um, get rid of that information,
Mm.
and that creates motion blur in real life.
Hmm. So, how did you get yourself involved in, like, wanting to do VR stuff? I assume you had interest in VR before you started working on ALVR.
Oh yeah, I just wanted a more immersive experience with every gaming and stuff.
Mm.
And because VR mimics how your eyes see with parallax,
Mm.
basically because your eyes are slightly to the right and slightly to the left, you have this slightly different view of the world in both eyes, and your
Mm.
eyes can um, read depth from that information.
Mm.
There's also a little bit more to that. Like there's this technology in VR called Verifocal, which basically changes the focal point of your eyes. So your eyes don't have like if you stare at an object like your hand, you notice how the background is a little bit blurred. That's because your eyes can only focus at uh, distances at a
Mm.
time, and that's because it has lens. Your eyes actually have a lens that it stretches and contracts to focus on different distance distances objects. You know, objects at different distances.
Mm. Mm. I just went to the Wikipedia page for Verifocal, and I don't know why this is the picture that's there, but the demo used is a picture of Tux, like the Linux penguin.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't actually know that.
I didn't know it either. I just wanted to find some information on Verifocal while you were talking about it.
Mhm.
So, how long have you had an interest in VR, and how long have you had an interest in actually working on this problem?
So I've had an interest for VR since I was probably in high school.
Mhm.
Uh, Probably around 2020,
Mhm.
a long time ago, and I really only got interested in developing an LV for VR applications once I discovered a open source, streaming app like LVR, because you can't really work on a closed source
Right.
uh, runtime of VR streaming application like you have on Windows
Mhm.
with Oculus software, the official Oculus software.
Right. Right. You have to go get a job working at the company to be able to work on that.
Mhm.
So, when did you become aware of ALVR?
I think I was browsing Reddit for open source alternatives because I kind of just always have a interest in figuring out how things work.
Mhm,
Um, Back when I was a child, I my parents and my grandparents would like buy me how it is made, like movie disc, and I would watch it, and
mhm, mhm,
I was always fascinated with it. And so I've always been kind of fascinated with how things work.
mhm. Okay, okay. So, did you have any background with programming before you started getting involved in ALVR, or did you very much learn just from the start when you got there?
I did have some experience on other open source projects, and I was currently taking programming classes
Mhm,
at my high school at the time. So I did have a little bit of experience. I wouldn't say I'm the best dev
mhm,
in the
mhm.
world, but I do know a few things.
Right, right. Tell me about those programming classes because I know a lot of people just don't get that experience, sadly.
So it starts with so you get like electives,
Mm,
and you can select electives that you want to take. And because I was interested in tech and I built my own PC, I'm like, huh, coding classes, that
mm.
would be fun to take. And so I just signed up for it. And the first year you learn Java.
Okay,
Um, I didn't really enjoy Java. It has like
I know that feeling.
it has a lot of boilerplate with
It
like
does,
the
yes.
main function and classes
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and like I was at the time I was like I feel like there's something better than Java because I just didn't really like classes.
Right, right.
After doing some research on
Mm-hmm,
to why OPP is bad and creates bad abstractions,
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
that kind of led me to Rust, which is what a lot of ALVR uses, but not all of ALVR uses. Um,
I know
and I started thinking,
GitHub's numbers are a bit weird and they count C and C++ weirdly, but according to GitHub, it says 52% Rust, 30% C++, 16% C, but sometimes they mix up C and C++ code.
yeah, it is C++.
Oh,
There's
okay.
no C
Yes.
because there's a reason why there's no C. It's because, from what I understand, the OpenVR bindings in C are kind of busted.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah, they don't work.
Okay, so it's about like half and half Rust and C++ then.
Mhm. I
Okay.
mean, there's some bash
Sure, sure, sure.
scripting.
Yeah, it says 1% other, so I'd assume that's part of the other.
Mhm.
Okay, so how long have you been doing Rust stuff then? You learnt that like when you started getting involved in LVR?
Yeah.
Okay.
Originally, like I said, I worked on other projects.
Mhm,
I originally came from Minecraft.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
I did a little bit of shader dev there, and then I went into a open source application mod called Iris.
mhm,
It was fun for a while. There was some drama,
mhm,
and I'll leave that at that. And yeah, I left.
mhm, mhm.
Um, and then I went to LVR, and I've been there ever since,
Okay.
happily working on it.
So for anyone who hasn't done any Rust development, because I've just started myself actually, like very recently, I was like, so I've been aware of Rust for a long, long time. I have had friends who have been shilling Rust to me since the Rust beta, telling me how Rust is going to change the world, Rust is going to be this massive language. I didn't bother to learn it way back then. Um, but for anyone who hasn't used Rust, I guess give like a brief rundown on the experience using it, what you like about the language, maybe what you don't like about the language, and things like that.
So one thing I like about it is, well, by default, your memory safe. Obviously, you have the unsafe keyword as a little escape hatch. One thing I don't like about it is async.
Mhm,
The
mhm,
async runtimes. Async is a little bit of a mess in Rust right now
mhm,
because
mhm,
you got Tokyo and you got small and you have these compatibility layers between them, and certain libraries use Tokyo and then other libraries need small, and you have to introduce the compatibility layers between the two runtimes, and
mhm.
it's a mess. And those bugs that come with it, for example, Tokyo really likes to spam a lot of threads, and so it makes the bugging applications a pain because the stack trace is just a bunch of threads.
Yeah, that sounds like a not a pleasant way to deal with it, especially when the just dealing with additional threads, just one extra thread makes everything harder. Adding anything more there, and yeah, I can't imagine that any of that debugging is fun, especially for any complex issues where you're not entirely sure on the replication conditions yet.
Mhm. Another thing that comes with that is we were kind of mixing synchronous code with async.
Mhm, mhm,
Uh, the connection code was asynchronous at the time. It's now synchronous.
mhm,
Thank God. Um, um, and because the C++ code was synchronous, and you did data copying over uh, the sides using foreign function interfaces in ALVR, sometimes you would get interesting bugs that would appear and would be very painful to debug.
mhm, mhm.
Don't mix async with synchronous. That's my recommendation.
So you said that when I brought up the C++ and C, you mentioned that you wouldn't want to use C in something like ALVR. Like, why would that be the case?
Yeah, you don't want to see because like I said, the bindings in OpenVR and C are kind of
Oh, okay,
busted,
no, you did. Okay, right,
and
right. Sorry, I completely forgot about that. My bad.
yeah,
I,
and
I, I
the
thought.
only reason why,
Okay, okay.
and
I
the only
thought
reason
we skipped over that.
no, yeah, we covered that. The only
Okay.
reason why we have C++ code is because there are some OpenVR bindings for us, but they don't cover the things that we need, and they're not that great.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
honestly, and make interfacing with the encoders on Linux kind of a pain
mhm, mhm.
because you have to go through FFI, and I'll get into the hacks that we have to do on Linux now.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, for
So
sure.
since we're all on the OVR right now, we have to fake that we're DRM least display on Linux
Mm-hmm.
because there is no direct mode uh, support. At least there was no direct mode support. Direct mode is basically when instead of like displaying just sending the image to a least display, you instead send a Vulkan image to a driver, and that driver encodes it and then or doesn't encode it or does whatever it wants with that Vulkan image and
Mm-hmm.
then sends it off to the VR display to be displayed, of course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's was made for Windows, so its API on Vulkan isn't exactly the best, but it's manageable. Um, and it was made for the Oculus runtime, so you can run SteamVR games on your Quest and a by streaming it to the Quest, of
Right,
course,
right.
not actually physically running it on the Quest.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with the Vulkan DRM leasing layer is it requires disabling a few things and also requires um, basically overriding the VR compositor wrapper and making your own that disables a few things like the I think it's called uh fossilizer, and it's basically a valve technology to create Vulkan shaded binaries that you can just, when the VR application runs again, you just load up those cached shaders rather than having to recompile that shader again.
Mhm.
Um, you have to disable that. It just doesn't work. And you don't get overlays. So example, Mablehead doesn't work. We need to disable that. Uh, and a few other things that we need to disable. And we also, here's what even the more hacky side than depending pretending that you're a DRM leased display. We have to stack walk the VR compositor's stack
Mhm.
to find the poses.
Okay.
Because without a direct mode, API support, we can't exactly um, get the poses because they're just sent as a image um, to the headset,
Can you expand
headset
upon
quote
on that?
unquote.
Like, what do you mean by that?
So stack walking is basically when you look at currently running this process memory
Mhm.
and find um, certain bytes in that application's memory. Generally, you look for like functions, and then in that function, you look for an offset to that um, memory location that stores that, and then you grab it. So there's two
Mhm.
different functions that we look at. We look at the async version and then the non-async version. So the async version is like when you're running like the um, compute um, queue version backend of SteamVR, and the um, synchronous or is when you don't run the compute
Mhm.
and you're not running asynchronous reprojection. And yeah.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Um, was there more you had to say on the hacks there, or was that pretty much it?
And that's pretty much it on the hacks.
Thank.
It doesn't sound like there's a lot of hacks, but the fact that you kind of have to stack lock SteamVR's internal memory is should be enough to scare away basically any normal developer.
Well, I guess put it in perspective. How much work has gone into like actually implementing these hacks?
Um, years,
Mhm.
years. So there was a person who originally like wanted Zovatal, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Wanted to add Linux support for ALVR. I don't know how long it took him, but I would guess it would take a while, and you have to either look at Ghidra or use a GNU tool called NM that shows you all the function symbols in a given binary.
Mhm.
And you have to look through like, I think there's like hundreds of maybe 1,000 functions, and you have to find the correct one.
Mhm.
Then once you find the correct one, you need to offset the memory until you find the right one. Then you have to verify that that's actually a pose, and you then have to um, kind of pose match. It's a little hacky what LVR currently does, and it actually produces some issues. We're working on a tracking rewrite for that, but you have to pose match. And the problem with pose matching when you're doing that is you're not given a untranslated pose.
Before you keep
So the
going on with that,
pose,
sorry, can you just explain what a pose is and then pose matching?
So a pose is basically the position of either your controllers or headset in
Okay.
2D space.
Okay. Okay.
So, translation, rotation, stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, and it's based off of a space. So you have like stage and you have local space. So local space would be um, like, let's say, like relative to something, and stage is like it's uh, it's stationary. It's like I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. It's like the box, like you're in a box, and that's your stage space.
Right. 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 Right.
And that box is stable, and the headset moves in that space.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, yeah,
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Cool. I just want to make sure people were aware of that one because you kept bringing up the term pose, but we hadn't actually gone over that yet.
discussed what pose is. And pose matching is basically it was done because you need to so you get a pose from SteamVR,
Hmm.
and you don't know if that pose is um the pose to this matching frame the um on the headset.
Hmm.
And so you want to match them. I forget the exact algorithm that ALVR uses for doing that, but you want to match it and make sure that they're the same. The problem is they're not. They're
Hmm.
basically never the same. And that introduces problems like drifting. Um, so basically, like your headset's view is X, um, and your SteamVR view is Y, but you want them to be um, the same.
Hmm.
And if they're not the same, then all of a sudden you can cause issues with like it's not lined up properly and stutters um, when the pose, like for example, if you move slow
Hmm.
because of how the pose matching algorithm works, because of the timestamps of the pose, they're more close together, and so the pose is more accurate. But when you move rapidly, the pose matching algorithm kind of breaks down, and I'm I'm pretty sure the pose is on SteamVR is actually slightly behind the real the pose of the headset, and that causes issues like stuttering, which is very bad. You don't want stuttering in VR. You want a nice, smooth pace
Hmm.
for, obvious reasons like motion sickness, like we talked about before.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I kind of derailed you from what you were saying before. If you remember where you were going, then can you continue with that? Otherwise, we can move on from that.
I sadly do not remember.
It was something about yeah, it was something about pose matching and uh poses off the stack. Sorry, I don't remember where
Oh
you.
yeah, stack walking.
Yes, yes.
So stack walking, like I said, is previously is a very hacky method,
Mhm.
w- and we want to get rid of it. But the problem with that is we're currently kind of stuck with whatever Valve gives us
Mhm.
because SteamVR, of course, isn't open source.
Mhm.
Um, so you can't just go in and implement it yourself. Um, Same reason why I kind of moved away from Windows and Oculus software in general.
Mhm.
Um, and so we're going to move to a runtime called Monado. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Mhm.
Um, and the cool thing about Monado is it's open source. Woo, everyone loves open source. So you can see how it behaves. Because being be honest, kind of a black box. You kind of just give it information and hope it does what you would expect it to do.
Mhm.
For example, it breaking expectations that you would normally assume. Like you would assume that you give SteamVR a resolution of your headset, that SteamVR would just give you an image of that exact resolution. It does not. It does not give you. And it gives you different sizes depending on GPU your GPU clock speed. And if it goes under a threshold, it just sets it to the index resolution and completely ignores the resolution you set. Um, yeah, it's great. And so when implementing direct mode, you need to add a whole bunch of extra steps, like you have to resize the image, scale it, and it's lovely. Um, it's great. Oh, and also another thing, this is another thing that is a problem
Mhm,
is let's say you expect your image to be a certain format because you want to give that format to the encoder,
mhm.
like or a shader that expects a image to be in a certain format, and SteamVR is just like, nah, you can have this format, and you gotta deal with it.
Right, right. So the
Which I
benefit
really,
of Monado is if there are cases where things are behaving weirdly, at least you can see internally why they're behaving weirdly,
Mhm.
and preferably address them if that's something that the project is interested in addressing.
Yes.
Okay, so when I go to the Monado website, it describes itself as an open source XR platform. What does it mean by XR?
So there's two APIs.
Mhm,
There's multiple APIs, but the two biggest ones are OpenVR, which obviously is SteamVR specific, unless
mhm,
if you're talking about Open Composite, which I'll talk about later.
mhm,
Um, and then there's OpenXR, which is obviously what Monado implements, and
mhm, mhm,
SteamVR implements both a OpenVR runtime and a OpenXR runtime. And the difference between OpenVR and OpenXR is OpenXR is a Chronos standard supported by many different manufacturers and projects, and OpenVR is really only supported by Valve. Um,
mhm, mhm.
it's not very open, if you would say that.
It's open if you
Um,
work at Valve.
it's yeah, yeah. Um,
Okay, so right, so OpenXR is just basically the open source approach of doing this effectively.
mhm.
Okay, okay,
It has a little bit
sure,
differences,
sure.
like for example, like you have extensions, and it's like the Vulkan, OpenGL,
Right, right, right.
type of Cronus things, and OpenDrive doesn't really have that. There's no such thing as extensions, and
Mhm,
yeah, it also works slightly different on the how it does poses and stuff like that,
mhm,
and
mhm.
um, timing.
For anyone who may have heard the name Kronos and recognize that, that is because basically all of the open graphic standards that you know about, for the most part, are by Kronos, like OpenCL, OpenGL, Vulkan, WebGL, things like that. All of that is managed under the Kronos banner.
Mhm.
Okay, okay. So what is Monado? Like, how does Monado fit into like the stack here?
So, like I said, Monado is a open source competitor
Mhm,
to SteamVR. So for one thing, it's a little bit more friendly to projects like us that tend to be very small.
mhm,
For example, there's another project that I've kind of been waiting on how I can introduce them called Wyvern.
Wyvern.
They Wyvern, yes. That's what Zavital currently works on
Mm,
because ALVR's infrastructure wasn't really made for Monado
mm, mm.
at the time, so it wouldn't be a good fit. And it was also made by another dude. I starts with an M. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name though. So he owns the repo and you know repository, and he contributes to it.
Mhm.
But I don't really know him on a online basis.
Right, right, right. Okay. So if we're looking at it at like the high level, right? How do
Mhm.
all of these pieces of VR fit together? Like ALVR, Monado, all this stuff. Like if you were looking at it like from the outside, right? Like if you ordered them in the stack of how things fit together, like how does this look? If that question is worded in a way that made
Yeah,
any sense.
yeah, that makes sense. So probably the most important stack is the runtime.
Mhm,
The runtime you is basically the thing that implements the standards that applications talk to.
mhm, mhm,
And obviously that's a very important stack. For example, any standalone headset has a runtime.
mhm.
Um, obviously SteamVR is a runtime, and um, yeah, it's the most important part of the stack. And then you got LVR, which basically just is like a middleman between your PC and your headset that is standalone.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, and then, of course, you got your applications which you run. So that'd be like games or like OpenBrush for painting and
mhm, mhm.
3D space. Those are probably I don't know where to put them in the stack because they're both important because without applications, you don't really have an ecosystem.
Sure.
But without, I guess I would put them on equal footing, streaming applications slash drivers and, regular OpenXR and VR applications.
Mhm, mhm. Okay. Okay. I don't know if we talked about this or you brought this up when we were actually recording, or if you brought this up beforehand. But you brought up at some point hardware support on Linux, and I don't have any clue what VR hardware support is like on Linux. As I said, my experience with VR is very out of date. So you did mention there were issues, and I'm sure there's more issues than just the one you mentioned.
Oh yeah, for example, standalone, it's probably in terms of SteamVR, the least supported um, headset type. It's, because of all the hacks and the lack of the direct mode API. Monado is a little bit better, but it's basically both runtimes are kind of made for your wired HMD or head mounted display because that's what basically it is. It's just a display with a few sensors to get poses from that point of view. And then you also got, so basically for trackers, like full body trackers, um, you you have vibes, and you have slimes. Those are both both have very good support, unlike standalone headsets. And then you have face tracking, and that's where you hit problems because unlike the previous Vive stuff, because Vive is kind of like the accessory provider for VR, basically, you run into issues because they changed their approach. Instead of writing OpenVR drivers. They have this own little application that kind of communicates, and you have this um, their own little SDK, and it's only
Mm-hmm.
really works on Windows and kind of run into files. But luckily, there's solutions that can enough for this problem called iTrack VR or Babel, I think it's called, or Bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Those are open source face tracking solutions. Then basically they use cameras and AI, the good type of AI, not the bad type like, you know, like your art AI, that or your co-pilot that steals, GNU code and stuff like that. Um, to basically um, take an image, a grayscale image, and build a expression model off of that image.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can, translate it onto a model, character, avatar, whatever you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
in the VR space, and basically have lifelike expressions.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of gestures, which is what we currently most people use, which basically requires you pressing buttons on the controller to control how your expressions on your face, whether you smile or frown or angry or stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For your social VR applications like VR chat.
Yeah, especially if for those cases, being able to actually express what you're trying to express would make that like a much more immersive experience.
100%, yeah.
Mhm. It is a just having gestures is it's better than nothing, right? Like it's better than just having a static face, but it's clearly like that was a stopgap that's not supposed to be the end goal. The end goal is like, you've probably seen all the massive improvements happening. I think the biggest improvements you can see, like without even being involved in the development of this stuff, if you want to just see what's happening in the world of face tracking, is go look at some like VTubers, right? Look at some of the people that they have these models where like thanks to what Apple has done with their like face tracking stuff, things have gotten like really good in that space. But of course, like all open source development always tends to lag behind things. When you're a multi-trillion-dollar company, you can spend a lot of money on getting things working perfectly in your proprietary solution.
Hmm.
Okay, so you did bring up VR chat before. You did say you wanted to like talk a bit about that. I don't know where you wanted to go with that really, but yeah, if there's anything you want to say there, feel free to bring that up.
Yeah, so as I said, VR chat is a social VR application
Mhm.
with a few major breakthroughs that
Mhm.
have recently happened, like video player support.
Mhm.
Um, and there's also a huge rave scene in VR chat, and that also recently got support. It needs a Windows protocol called RTSC, I think it's called, and basically, uh, Proton didn't support it up until recently, but you do need like, I think, I think, um, I mean, Glorious Eagle made forget who exactly created it, but they created patches
Mhm.
for in Wine and to add support for that, and
Mhm.
now you can enjoy your raves in VR chat, which you couldn't do before.
I've honestly never messed around with VR chat. Like I've seen like YouTube videos of it and all that, but I've never used VR chat myself. It
Yeah.
does seem really cool. But also that involves me talking to people, and I talk too much when I'm doing these videos, and when I'm not doing the videos, I kind of just want to chill. My social battery is very drained from talking all day.
Yeah. I get with that. I get with that. I work in an industry where you talk to a lot of people, and
Hmm.
at the end of the day, you're just done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's see, where can we go from here? Um, Actually, was there anything more you wanted to
Well,
say about like hardware support? Because I don't know if you were done with the
no,
topic.
that's basically, I would like to bring up projects that I think could use a little bit of help from the community.
Okay.
So there's Open Composite, which I previously
Yes, you did bring that up. Yes.
mentioned briefly. Basically, it is a translation layer that translates OpenVR application API calls
Mm-hmm.
to OpenXR application API calls.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows you to play OpenVR games like, excuse me, VR chat and on Monado, which is obviously only implements OpenXR.
Mm-hmm.
It's only maintained by one guy,
That
so
is the case with
you
so
know,
many really, really cool projects.
give him some love and support, you know. And it's still, I forget what's its project progress on the total OpenVR API,
Mhm.
but it recently has received skeletal hand model support, which some OpenVR applications need to run at all, which, you know, it's kind of important. You want to support as many applications as possible.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and it also needs to translate, I think what's one of the problems I remember it having? I think it has problems with um, shutdown and startup or something. I don't
Okay.
exactly remember. I have to
Mhm.
go look at it. But if someone wants to, you know, figure that out and solve it, I'm sure they'll be happy.
Mhm. 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 Okay, that sounds like a really cool project. You mentioned the was that the only one you want to call out, or were there other ones you wanted to bring attention to as well?
Yes. Wyvern, of course.
Mhm.
The I feel like Elvira was a slightly bigger project than the Wyvern. Um, but both of us need more developers.
Sure, sure.
Developing a streaming application is complicated
Mhm.
because you have to deal with the encoder, APIs missing, for example, and another issue specific to um, Monado is it sometimes on low-end hardware, it decides to lock the application refresh rate to half of the headset, even though it can achieve it's hitting 90, and that's because I think the pacer, which basically paces the application, so you're always getting frames
Mhm.
when
Mhm.
you need them, uh, has this feedback loop. I think it's the exact um, way, but I think it either goes negative or positive, and when it does that, it kind of trips up uh, the um, the pacer and causes it to basically end up locking itself to half of the refresh rate of the headset, and it will not get out of that lock.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, it's fun.
Uh, yeah, I. Well, look, that would make my issues even worse. Less frame rate, hey, maybe a couple of stutters here and there, a bit of latency. You know, very pleasant VR experience.
Yeah.
So when it comes to refresh rate, like at what point is it generally accepted that like that's a good refresh rate to be hitting?
You want to at least be hitting, um, I would say 45
Mm-hmm.
with the headset's native being 90. You don't want to really go any lower than that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously, the higher the better,
Sure.
in terms of refresh rate. Um, but you really don't want to be going below 45,
Mm-hmm.
I would say,
Okay.
especially if you're very sensitive to motion sickness.
Mm-hmm. Right. 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 Yeah. 45 sounds really low, but maybe it's maybe.
It's not that bad, and that's because of another technology
Uh-huh.
called reprojection.
Okay.
That basically synthesizes new frames uh, off of old data.
Okay. So it sounds like there's been a lot of work in trying to just deal with the problem in more ways than just brute forcing more numbers.
Mhm.
Because I guess there's always going to be, like, obviously your best experience is going to be on the highest of high end hardware, but I guess if you want this to be something that people actually adopt, you need to make it so, like, middling and lower end hardware is actually viable to play most things.
Yeah, especially with um, not being able to compute tunnel.
Right, because if you need a 4090 for your experience to be good, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've brought
Mm.
up the idea of direct mode and display leasing. Um can you just explain for anyone who's not aware what display leasing is? And we're obviously going to lead into the DRM leasing discussion after this.
Oh yeah. So DRM leasing is basically a protocol that needs to exist because VR headsets are special little snowflakes that need to bypass the system compositor um, and go directly to the runtimes compositor and skip all the steps of a regular desktop compositor step because VR uh, displays need to have very low latency
Mhm,
and they have special needs, like they need to be very consistent on pacing with a desktop display. If a frame takes 1 minute to update, that's no problem. On a obviously, I'm exaggerating, but in a VR application, if a frame takes a little bit more reasonable amount of time, a 100 milliseconds to update, you're gonna get sick.
yeah.
Um, and so you need to bypass the system compositor that may have other applications that it needs to render and go directly to the runtimes compositor, which has a very, very narrow focus
Mhm,
um, on VR applications. For example, it needs to do lens distortion correction, mirror correction, and a few other things that just are side effect of having lenses in front of a display.
mhm, mhm.
And
I
obviously, that's not fit for a system compositor.
mhm. I guess a good way to put it is a stutter on a flat display is an annoyance, but a stutter on a VR display is a health risk.
Yes,
Okay. So when
because
the conversation of DRM leasing comes up, no one really brings up what happens on the X11 side. So on that side, like what happens? I assume I haven't heard any issues about it, so I assume you can just make it work without any problem.
Yeah, that's because it's implemented in the Xorg server, so you really don't have to worry about that as a compositor.
Mhm.
It's kind of like you just write the application, your compositor, and you get leasing.
Mhm.
On Wayland, obviously, the roles are switched up a little bit, and the compositor needs to actually implement that protocol. And if it doesn't, well, then your display either is not going to turn on, or it's just going to be treated as a normal display, and your runtime, which is expecting to receive a direct signal to that display, is not going to receive one. So it's just going to be like, wait, there isn't a headset.
Mhm.
And just say, there isn't a headset because we can't see.
So what is this? I know the answer to this, but anyone who's not aware, what is the state of DRM leasing under Wayland?
The state of DRM leasing, hold on just a moment.
It's a very short list of things that don't support DRM leasing.
Could you repeat your question?
Okay, it's all good. I'll just cut that bit out. The state of DRM leasing on Wayland. I know the answer to this. But for anyone who's unaware, give people a brief rundown.
It's great, unless you use GNOME, as because GNOME things. I don't use GNOME, and that's all I'm gonna say about it.
What are you actually using as your desktop right now?
It depends. Sometimes I use KDE, sometimes I use Cosmic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the rusty that
Yes.
System 76 is making.
I did see I do want to bring up Cosmic a bit later. I did see that you have made a couple of commits to it. Because I'm very excited for Cosmic as well. I haven't had a chance to test it just yet, but I am very excited for what I'm seeing with it.
Yeah, it is definitely coming together. It's gonna be great.
Okay, so what needs to be said about DRM leasing, right? Like from your perspective, someone who actually is involved, because I can look at this from the outside, right, and I see there are people from Valve, there are people from other desktops, there are application developers who are saying we need DRM leasing support on GNOME. You are holding back the development of this technology by not supporting this protocol, but that's just what I've seen. Like, what is your perspective on this?
My perspective is I agree with those people,
Mm-hmm.
and it does affect LVR because we do kind of use that protocol without having the direct mode driver support in SteamVR.
Mm-hmm.
But now that they've implemented it recently, it's not perfect by any means. Um, but it's workable. That's no longer a concern for us. So, um, I still wouldn't recommend using GNOME if you're going to be doing VR,
Mm-hmm.
but it's workable now.
It's workable. I know there is
If
the
you happen to have standalone headsets, only standalone headsets,
only
though.
standalone. Okay, what is the difference between having a standalone headset and one that's not? Then in this case.
So a standalone headset is basically a whole entire system with a wired headset or HMD. It's basically just a display with sensors.
Okay.
And so with that, you actually need to send display information to that over a display protocol, which a normal system compositor, like I said previously, would usually just immediately grab it and not give it to any other
Mm-hmm.
um, program. But for silent headsets, you can communicate over any protocol you really want. It could be display, like DisplayPort, HDMI, or you could communicate over USB, or you could communicate over Wi-Fi. So you don't really have to deal with the problems that come with people not supporting a certain protocol.
So you can sort of just like, I guess, ignore the whole issue and just work around it in those cases.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, are you aware of the more recent discussions about DRM leasing on GNOME? Like, as of a couple of weeks ago, some merge requests have been opened.
Yes, I was aware of that.
I'm trying to find the
I'm not
actual
sure what the
one.
current status of them is, but
Yeah.
I do know that it did happen.
If we go to this one, yeah, there's just so many different so many commits here, so many issues here. I'm trying to find out exactly. Is it this one? Yes. This this is the one by Blake Batson, I believe, is the one. Maybe this is a different one. Wait, is this a different merge request? Wait. Um, I think this might be a different one. What the? Why are there? Okay, why are there two open merge requests about this? Um, like
I don't
I GNOME. That's why.
know. Yeah, that sums it up.
Like I can. I was gonna say I can understand why there is this issue on GNOME, but like I think that the main issue that I have is that there was this agreement to implement the protocol back during the discussion. That I think that's the worst part about it, right? It would be one thing if the
Mhm.
entire discussion got stalled because there was just nothing happening whatsoever. If we were still in the state that we were in like 3 or so years ago, but the fact that there was an ACK and they were like, hey, yeah, let's actually implement this, let's go ahead with it. Like, it's just, for me outside, it's annoying, right? But I can only imagine how much worse it is for someone who just has to say, if you want to make use of this solution, like in Valve's documentation for SteamVR, their solution for running GNOME Wayland is one of the solutions is install KDE.
Yeah, it's great.
Like I don't know, like I'm happy that something is being worked on and progress is being made here, but it's just it's better late than never, right? But I really wish that this entire whole DRM leasing saga just never happened and this just got resolved years ago. It would be one thing if GNOME was this small desktop that no one had to care about, but GNOME is the face of Linux. It is the first thing that a lot of people see, and they see VR just not working. In the case of with the exception of like the standalone headsets, but I don't know. Like it just if there's anything you want to add to that, go ahead. It's just there's a lot of things I'm just sick of dealing with when it comes to issues on GNOME.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I would put it on the same level of frustration of having to deal with all the hacks that ALVR has for years and
Mhm,
having like Valve like finally taking things serious for SteamVR on Linux and
mhm,
actually working on things now.
mhm,
Because it was hell
mhm,
for about 2 years in the project of having to deal with issue after issue after issue,
mhm, mhm,
especially with like so like SLR, the Steam Linux runtime, it's
mhm.
great and all, except for when you can't use it because you're missing APIs, and so you have to implement workarounds that don't work
Mhm,
with that runtime because it's too old and you need modern features.
mhm, mhm. I think I might have come across that discussion you were having. I'm not going. I didn't save the link though. As I said, I went back through your entire history on GitHub trying to find things to add to the list of topics. So I think I might have actually saw that one.
Yeah, I was really hoping it could be solved, but
Mhm,
you know, it just couldn't.
mhm, mhm,
That's the state of a lot of things with LVR, with SteamVR. It just can't be solved
mhm.
because we're waiting on Valve to do things,
Right, right.
and Valve is slow.
I guess that's
There's
why you have
there's
this
this,
interest in
Valve
Monado.
time. Yes, yes. Because Monado, you don't have to rate on this low company to actually get a working product
Mhm.
out. I mean, SteamVR is a product and it's horrible.
Okay,
I,
can you expand upon that, please? Like, what besides any of the stuff that you said, like, what do you not like about Steam VR?
well, they basically they have so many issues. For one, I already discussed like they have this weird dynamic image stuff where like it can be any size that they decide, and if they have to use a fallback, they use a fallback rather than just of their own hardware, and so
Mhm,
it's like they only care about themselves with the
mhm,
runtime. They don't try to make it usable for anybody else. And the just lack of interest, the amount of times they've broken things, the lack of testing that they do. Like, for example, there was like at least, I think, three separate times when they've messed up a bash script. Like, they bash wrap everything, which is awful to start with, but I can kind of understand why they do it, but like,
Valve seems to have
it's
a
rough
very
to
bad
go.
history with bash scripts.
Um, yeah. And they basically like update. They basically just completely deleted the script and made it reference this internal script that they never committed, and SteamVR broken links, and you have to use workarounds like going to the old version, and then I think you had to do a few edits,
Mhm,
and um, the reprojection is um a mess. They've recently done some improvements to it. Obviously, I can't tell you what improvements are there other than the changelog of experimental improvements to async reprojection. Um, so hopefully they get the stuff together, but it's gonna be a painful road for you know, maybe the next few weeks or how long it takes.
mhm, mhm,
The last, this goes with software development, this goes with road trips, but like the last few moments
mhm,
are the most painful.
mhm. Okay, well, uh, let's try to put this in like, in a different light, right? Ha- since the time that you've been working on ALVR, have things been getting better at least?
One step forward, two steps back is how I would put it.
Okay, okay, that was not the answer I had hoped for. Okay.
Yeah, we're having to introduce more and more workarounds as we get closer to removing all those workarounds. So
Right.
that's how I would put it.
Mhm,
For example, they added Wayland when they got the leasing, they added a Wayland backend, and so you would either like depending on like if you're running NVIDIA or because NVIDIA didn't have support for that just yet, so you would have to like force it to run under X Wayland and and then we introduced a another wrapper that wraps the Wayland protocol. But the problem with wrapping the Wayland protocol is, well, now you have the GNOME problem. Um, and then they introduced the runtime, and so we solved that by asking users to install Steam Play None, and then setting the runtime to use that in the compatibility drop-down menu thing that you'd usually use to select Proton versions.
Mm-hmm.
And then that broke recently. And so now we're having to tell our users to add um, there's launch options that you can
Mm-hmm.
add. And so you have to add the specific launch options because using Steam Play None broke in 2.5,
Mm-hmm.
which introduced uh, direct mode support, kind of. And that's because they forgot to include certain APIs that you kind of need as the driver to access the image. Um, there's this internal VR core API called Receive Shared FD because Vulkan has a API that allows you to turn a file descriptor into a Vulkan image,
Mm-hmm.
but that wasn't, exposed in the API, and it's not like you can just um, add it to the header file because uh the 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 how would I put it? The so file, the symbol is private.
Mm-hmm.
So if you add it to a header file, it just say that's not found because the function itself isn't exposed to uh, any public interface.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you have to do more hacks. More hacks. And that being you have to use a GNU function. Let me pull it up. Da, 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 da. This new guy that came in, personified demon or duck, depending on how it wants to go by.
Mm-hmm.
He's adding Monado support. Thank you. I gotta scroll so far up. Let's look. Uh, Trying to find it.
You're good. You're good.
Oh, I think I can find it better if I do this. Yeah, it's called DL iterate PHDR.
Mm-hmm.
It's a GNU function that allows you to iterate a a object file and find private functions and then do a few more things to get a pointer to that function and then be able to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with doing it that way is if they update the that program, the offset to that function changes. And so if they don't, if we happen to get things working before they finally release that API, because there's a few other problems that we have to work out, specifically with the present call, we have to re-import images, which you shouldn't do, and the API guarantee isn't actually upheld by the runtime. Um, they didn't check that. Thank you. They're working on that. That's the good thing, though.
Okay.
It's just going to
Okay.
take a while. Um, and so you have to basically at runtime, you have to look at that and then analyze it and then figure out the new offset to that. And it's a mess. It's very much a mess.
maybe this is a much shorter answer. Is there anything that you have worked on that hasn't been a hack and hasn't been a mess and has just been pleasant?
There's nothing I've worked on with SteamVR that's been pleasant.
Okay. Oh.
They're good guys, like the people who work on it.
Mm,
It's a mess.
mm. I wanted to throw a rope there, see if you could find something, but nope. Nope.
Yeah. No, there's nothing.
Oh. Well, it sounds like it definitely occupies quite a bit of your time then.
Oh yeah. We get like I think on average maybe 1 and 2 support questions a day, which doesn't sound like a lot,
Mhm.
but I have a life outside of ALVR. So
Sure.
yeah.
Well, let's move to something that actually is pleasant. Let's talk a bit about a bit about Cosmic, because as I said, I'm super excited for it, and it sounds like you're interested in you're making some commits to it. So I presume that you're also fairly interested in it as well.
Yeah, I am very interested in it. I'll admit, I'm a little bit of a Rust fanboy.
Mhm.
Um, I really like Rust. So I really like when I see components written in Rust. But that's not the only thing. Like
Sure.
obviously, um, I like so the problem with KDE is it's sometimes a little bit crashy. Um,
Yup.
when you run it with um, especially with SteamVR, which
Mhm.
is sometimes like for example, like there was a bug a while ago. It was a plasma, I think it's plasma shell bug.
Mhm.
It wasn't really a SteamVR bug, but SteamVR triggered it. And when you're developing for applications, you constantly running that program, kind of gets annoying.
Mhm.
And just and also sometimes it would crash other programs with the shell too, which is like, yay, thank you. I don't like losing my work
Mhm.
um, with other applications because there's still no protocol for saving application state and stuff like that. So sometimes you
Yeah,
lose
that's a
things.
very long work in progress.
Yeah,
Hopefully that happens at some point. Hopefully, my hope is it happens sometime during Plasma 6.
yeah.
We've got like 9 years to work on that, so we'll see.
Obviously, like a composite crash isn't going to say that, but just the more modularized it is, and you know, I've seen a few crashes because obviously it's alpha, and out of as long as it's not a compositor crash, I've never seen applications get brought down
Mm, mm.
when program crashes. For example, I remember this one crash where like you move a point your cursor outside a certain point and your panel will just crash. That was a bug at one point. Um, that was fun. I'm like, oh yeah, that's how you introduce it. Well, I'll just make sure not to do that.
Mm, mm.
But yeah, that's alpha for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously that's not an issue anymore, and it's been very stable so far,
Mm,
which is ever since that bug's been solved. There's been a few. Smithy, as you know, that's their library that they use. Um, it's had some regressions with X Wayland,
okay.
which it's because, from what I understand, Cosmic is really the only DE that is kind of focused on getting X Wayland applications working well.
Mm,
I know that a few other compositors that use Smithy have started implementing support, like a few. months ago, I think,
Mhm.
um, for X Wayland, but like really only Cosmic was doing that, so there's a lot of regressions. Like for example, there's a refactor that broke broke I think the geometry calculations for it, and so you would like move a window to underneath another window, and you just couldn't click on the window that was above that previous window.
Well,
So
the whole Smithy ecosystem is still relatively new. Like Smithy's been around for a bit, but as for things actually using it, and as for things being sort of kind of ready to use as a regular person, like that's a relatively new thing. So I'm not surprised there are still these regressions that happen.
yeah, but it's like in terms of the theming, I know you it's amazing. I know you don't like the light thing, but I
I
actually like it because
Okay,
it
okay, sell
doesn't
me on the
blind
light
you.
theme. I want to
It
see you
doesn't
do
blind
this.
you.
That's true. That's a
So
fair point.
my the problem with modern light things is they're literally just blasting you with F, the hex code of FFFFF, like full bright
Yes,
light,
yes, they
and it's
think
just
white
like,
means as bright as the display goes.
yeah, and Cosmic actually reasonably understands that that's a bad design pattern and doesn't do that.
Mm-hmm. Which one of their blog posts talks about the light theme? Here it is. That's okay. I'll give you that, right? I just I I don't know what it is about the theme. I think it's that the dark accents around the outside instead of the light accents. So if they like my main issue is if they swapped the light and dark parts around, I think it would look better. But I do understand what you're saying there with it just simply not blinding you and that being it's much nicer than how Libid Wader does it, where it's I don't know if it's FFFFF, but it definitely feels like it.
Yeah.
But I'm a dark theme person anyway, so honestly, it doesn't look. If their light theme is bad, I'm never gonna look at it after the first 30 seconds of opening up Cosmic anyway, so it doesn't really affect me.
And also, while you were talking about how you didn't like how they inverted it, I
Mm,
actually think I like the inversion because
okay.
it actually, um, so the darker parts of the theme
Mm,
are fill up more space than the lighter part of the theme,
mm,
and and I think that just helps even on top of the not using full brights right, to make it less of a blinding theme.
mm. Okay, that's fair. That's definitely fair. I think it would bother me more if they didn't have a theming system, right? Like the fact that they are not like a whatever GTK's nonsense theming it had the entire time. It was just CSS, but actually building a theming API from day one, where I I haven't seen someone do this, but I imagine you probably could swap it the way that I would like it as a light theme anyway. So it probably isn't that big of a deal. It's just the default. Um, I think the fact
Yeah.
they have a theming API there from the start honestly just deals with all of my issues, right? Because if you just don't like something, you can just recolor it.
Hmm.
So what besides it being a little buggy because it's not even the alpha right now, you're pre-alpha. Like they haven't even
Yeah.
got the alpha out yet. What has the experience been like?
It's been very good if you ignore the bugs. I love the applications. I think they're improving the UX, in terms of like what Plasma has. And then I forget the exact reason why Plasma, but like one of my friends in ALVR brought this up about how like the Plasma theme isn't exactly consistent across all their applications.
Mm.
and they don't follow the same style. And so you go from one application to another, and you're not sure you're going to have the same workflow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and GNOME doesn't have that problem, and neither does Cosmic.
Yeah, I think that has to do with the way they're doing widgets in KDE. I know KDE has like a widget library called Kirigami, but I don't know what is and is not using it. So I would imagine that probably would lead to some of those issues as well.
Hmm.
Um, but okay, with Cosmic, are you a floating or a tiling user?
I am floating, and that's
Okay,
just because that's what I'm used to.
fair enough, fair enough.
I would love to try tiling. It's a hurdle for me
Mhm.
it's a big hurdle for me to get over.
Right. No, I'm totally fine. Like, someone wants to use floating, like that's fine. One of the things I like about Cosmic is it clearly had, like, the developers clearly wanted to make both experiences actually good from what I'm seeing. Like, when I've spoken to Jeremy, and when I spoke to Carl as well, like, they were both like, yeah, tiling, it's not the thing the majority of our users use when they were still doing the whole, like, GNOME pop shell thing.
Hmm.
But it was still something that enough of their users cared about that they wanted to make sure it was going to be a good experience in this as well. And whilst I'm on KDE right now, and I'm doing things floating because Polonium doesn't work. Is the main reason. Actually, it crashed my entire compositor. I think it was because of a vertical monitor bug. I don't remember the exact reason, but whilst I'm on floating right now, I prefer tiling. Like, I've been using tiling window managers since I started using Linux. i3, Awesome WM, BSPWM, Sway, Hyperland, and that's the better experience for me. But there are very specific cases where I prefer floating windows. Like, I usually have my notes when I'm doing this in a floating window, or if like my browser window, I usually have it floating over the video call because I put it over my face, so I don't have to stare at my face the entire time. And just little things like that where I want my floating experience to also be good for the edge cases where I use it. And I think by having both a floating and tiling experience in one, it gives people the opportunity to actually try out tiling, because what I find as the reason a lot of people don't want to do it is they're scared away from the configuration process. They see like they see like i3, and it's like, okay, I have to write a config file to make my window manager work the way I want it to work. Like, that just seems overwhelming. Whereas Cosmic, it's a desktop environment, so it's got all of that GUI tooling there, and I think a lot more people are going to realize that maybe they do like tiling, and the issue they actually had was they just didn't know how to or where to start with actually, like, configuring a tiler.
Yeah, I can see that definitely being an issue. Like it's not a specific problem with me with tiling.
Mhm.
It's more of like I want like for me, like I sometimes want to have a little bit of overlap
Mhm.
over applications. For
Mhm.
example, like maybe I want to like if I have like my music application open
Mhm.
and I have like Discord open, maybe I want like the audio section of the audio streaming video music streaming application to be slightly exposed,
Okay.
so I can just quickly move my mouse over and I know exactly where the UI is, and I can
Mhm.
just quickly do that. But
I guess that
I
makes
do
sense.
understand there is some organization that you lose with that.
Mhm.
It's just a compromise that I'm willing to make.
Right, right, right. No, I get what you're saying there. That actually does sound pretty useful. Um, I do all of my media control on my keyboard, so, like, for me that's not really a big deal. But I guess if you don't have that set up, like, yeah, I can see the value there. like, as much as I like tiling, I understand that people have their other workflows and they have things that work for them. I also understand there are people that don't have workflows and they just open 50 windows on the same monitor and have no idea where things are. But, you know, it's your computer. You can ultimately do what you want with it. I just want the I just want there to be the opportunity for people who want to try out something new to actually be able to do that in a way where it's not like crazy intimidating, right? Like that's my point. Where most window managers, even something like i3, which is relatively well configured out of the box, is still fairly intimidating for someone who has always done everything from a desktop environment.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
Mhm. So, in its current state, what do you feel like Cosmic still kind of needs to like iron out? Besides, obviously, like specific bugs, but general issues that just exist maybe across the desktop or in application design or anything like that.
Well, I do know that I've had some, not like maybe application design, but like maybe working on, for example, the Cosmic Store. I've had a lot of problems with it on
Mhm.
launch. It just doesn't want to detect any of my apps
That's
I
fair.
have installed. That's more of a bug,
Mhm.
but it's kind of a big bug.
Mhm, mhm,
So
mhm.
I would like to see. I know they have like pop, and that's their thing. But I would like to see maybe a little bit more testing on other distros for more distro integrated software, like a store,
Mhm.
um, where you have to use like package kit and stuff like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I for me, like I was never gonna interact with a graphical store anyway. So for me, like that is as non-issue as it gets for me. But I know there's a lot of people out there that, you know, do like to use these graphical software managers.
I like them
Mhm.
in a way because it gives you more information. You can see like how the application looks like, and you don't have to like search up in the browser this application, open up another tab for this application. You can just have this one window, and you want to look up an application, you look it up,
Mhm.
and you look at how it looks, and you can decide to install it. Usually, I prefer to roll for installing things, but like having a store to actually view how things look like in a centralized location is incredibly helpful. And I think more DEs need to have something like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
I know Plasma has that, like they have Discover. I know GNOME has that. Um, I guess I should say, is there any other Ds? Well, no, I guess I should say that I would love to see like maybe generic non-DE based solutions
Mhm.
for like smaller um, compositors like maybe River, Hyperland, um, XFC, stuff like that.
Mhm. Mhm. I I'm sure there's got to be something out there. I know there's some terminal-based solutions, but I don't know. Yeah, a lot of the software managers are just desktop specific. If someone knows about one, wait, I guess well, it's not. In this case, it's not distro independent, but there are things like Pamac, which yeah, that exists. Um, but that is still like Arch specific in that case.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I don't know of something that is both distro and desktop independent. Someone's gonna tell me though. I'm sure they're gonna tell me. So with Cosmic, are you just running that like on your Arch system?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've installed it through
I
the
made a
Cosmic Epoch Git, whatever it is.
No,
Okay.
I've installed it using um the standalone packages for each application because
Okay.
I like just having the latest and um to experiment with. Um and you're kind of reliant on when Pop! OS or someone wants to decide to update Epoch to
Right,
get
right.
new versions. And when you have a pre-alpha um DE, sometimes you just want those features as fast as you can get them, and you know, obviously that's the faster way to do it.
Mhm. Okay, okay. I hadn't even thought of doing it that way. I guess that it probably takes. Does it? How long does it take you to actually like do an update? And like, how many pieces of Cosmic are there at this point?
Um, there's the settings app, there's the settings daemon, there's the panel, there's the applets, but they're all like grouped into one thing, one
Mm-mm.
package. There's the compositor, there's the launcher, there's the greeter, there's the notification server, there's of course the session manager, Cosmic Session. Um,
I didn't expect you to start just
oh yeah,
listing
there's
out
Cosmic
components.
Files, Cosmic Files,
Mm.
there's Cosmic Editor, um, and yeah, I think that's about it. There's
Mhm.
also Cosmic Player, but that's kind of experimental, and I don't think it's packaged yet.
Um, I'm looking at the on Epoch. It's not listed here, so
Yeah, it's very experimental. They like it's kind of like one of those things where like, yeah, it's not exactly ready to be downloaded by and used by most people
I'm
because it
assuming
doesn't.
Cosmic Player is a video player.
Yes, it's a video player. Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I forgot to mention Cosmic Screenshot too,
Mm.
and Cosmic Render. That's another one too.
Mm. Huh. One thing, I the with Cosmic, right? I do want to test it, but testing it right now on Arch is going to be a bit of a, a bit annoying. Either way, either I have to go and install everything independently, or do the whole Cosmic Epoch Git thing, and that's going to take quite a bit to compile. I hope, and I would imagine that it happens. I really hope that someone on the Arch team, when things are ready, decides to make a package. I will
Oh
be
yeah, 100%.
I'll be very surprised if it doesn't happen, but maintaining a desktop is obviously like a big maintenance effort. So I don't know if
Mhm.
it'll happen during the alpha or they're gonna wait till later. I'm probably just gonna end up testing Cosmic in a virtual machine using something like there's a image of UBlue that has Cosmic attached to it, or maybe I'll grab like a Pop! OS ISO when they're shipping it on Pop! OS and test it on that.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty soon because from what I understand, it's gonna come out in 24.20 not 24.04
Mhm.
or 24.10. I forget which one.
Yeah, the question is when they decide to release it. Um, we'll have to wait and see on that. I'm excited for Cosmic. I very much am because I know it's still an alpha and I know there's still going to be bugs, but there's just so much about it that seems like it's coming together well, and it's come together really, really quickly. And I have a lot of faith in the System 76 guys that they actually can get something really well put together. And it seems like they are learning from the mistakes of both GNOME and KDE and using that to sort of jumpstart where they are. They're not making a desktop in a vacuum. They are making a desktop in the context of what exists now and learning from what's already been done before.
Mhm. Yeah, which is obviously an advantage for them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I hope it turns out well. I really do, because I want to try it. I definitely do, and it may end up just being the thing that I run, or I go back to something else. Because I don't hate KDE, but I also have my own issues with KDE that I've talked about plenty on my channel. My favorite one being the whole let's just not use your RAM as cache. Let's just use your drive as cache for no reason.
Oh yeah, I'm glad I have it in .2 in my PC
Mhm,
because that definitely limits that as well.
mhm. Well, before we start wrapping things up, is there anything you want to touch on that we didn't talk about with like VR or anything else you want to talk about?
Um, no, I don't think there is anything. I think we had a wonderful conversation.
Okay, let me see. Is there everything I want to bring up here? Um, I think that's pretty much it, actually. Yeah, it looks like it. Okay, well, I guess you already mentioned some projects before, but if you want to bring up projects you want to direct people towards again, go ahead and do that.
Oh yeah, I would recommend going to the Linux VR Discord. I'll maybe post a comment or send you a link to that.
Yes, just
Um,
send me an email or something.
all right. Obviously there's ALVR. There's Wyvern, Open Composite, Monado. Um, as much as SteamVR is a pain sometimes, that's a cool project too. Give them some love, They've probably very stressed out with, we're looking at their issue tracker. Um, and yeah.
Awesome. You don't really have any like online presence with this account, so there's not really anything that I can direct people towards with your stuff, but you do have a GitHub account, so if you want to stalk
hmm
what Vixia is doing on GitHub, go to that GitHub account, I guess.
Yeah, I only use Discord. You can find me in LVR's Discord or Linux VR's Discord
Mhm.
and ask questions there if you want to. If you don't have Discord, um, I guess tough luck. I don't really have anything to say about that. Oh, I guess
Oh,
I do have Matrix.
okay.
You can do, I have a Matrix that I can probably do a comment if you don't like Discord. Um, yeah, other than that, pretty, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Okay, as for my stuff then, the main channel is Brody Robertson. I do Linux videos there 6-ish days a week. Go check it out, see what's there. I don't know what'll be out by the time this comes out, or by the time you see this. There'll be something Linux related, probably. The gaming channel is Brody on Games. I stream there twice a week. I'm probably still playing through It Takes Two and also Sekiro, because I am very bad at Sekiro and it's going to take quite a bit of time. And if you're listening to the audio version of this, you can find the video version on YouTube at Tech Over Tea. If you want to find the audio version, there is an RSS feed. It'll be on your favorite podcast apps. Search for Tech Over Tea and you will find it. I'll give you the final word. What do you want to say?
I hope everyone has a good night or day whenever you're watching this.
Easy enough. See you guys later.